government is planning to scrap the Human Rights Act and to replace it with their own Bill of Rights. Now, I'm going to explain some of the worst parts of this bill and what it means for all of us. Now, the Bill of Rights was in the Conservative Party manifesto in 2019, so they've been planning this for a long, long time. However, when it came to the Rwanda flight and that flight got grounded, that enraged a lot of Tories, and scrapping the Human Rights Act has become much more urgent for them. As we know, the European Court of Human Rights helped stop these really awful and basically fascistic policies of sending refugees to Rwanda. Boris Johnson has hinted that the UK could leave the ECHR, essentially paving the way for a much more watered-down version of our human rights. Now, this wasn't the EU interfering, as what many on the right seem to claim, but it's a convention that was established after World War II by a group of European leaders, including Winston Churchill, which is quite funny since Winston Churchill is the darling of the political right. It also included trade unions, academics, religious leaders, civil society and lawyers. Now, when the Tories won in 2019, a panel from the Independent Human Rights Act produced a report 580 pages long, but the government completely ignored it, which is quite clear that the Tories are playing an ideological game. In fact, Dominic Raab announced an overhaul of the Human Rights Act before the IHRAR, which is the Independent Human Rights Act Review. There's so many abbreviations, it can get quite complicated, quite a mouthful. But yeah, Dominic Raab announced an overhaul of the Human Rights Act before the review had even come back to the government. So it was clear that they're not taking advice on board, they're not taking other people's review. They are literally, like I said, playing it an ideological game. Now, the Bill of Rights will categorically water down our rights. Without the Human Rights Act, there wouldn't have been justice for the victims of Hillsborough. The Human Rights Act also allowed victims to claim compensation from the Metropolitan Police in their claim against John Warboys, who was the taxi driver who sexually assaulted 12 women. Other parts of the Bill of Rights are also looking at watering down migrants' rights. Now, no one is surprised about that, but the Conservative Party are gunning for immigrants. They've done it the whole time they've been in power. Now, according to human rights group Liberty, proposals in this bill will make it harder to fight against deportation, and they believe the legislation will give UK citizens more rights over migrants. Now, it kind of sounds like migrant apartheid. Now, I'm not conclusively claiming that, but you can draw parallels there, especially with the language. Now, they also go on to say this is one of many cynical government attempts across multiple pieces of legislation to weaponise people's attempts to access their rights, which can involve issues of life and death and or their right to respect for their family life in order to justify weakening protections for everyone, but which will evidently have disproportionate effects on the people targeted by such proposals. Now, the bill could also potentially breach the Good Friday Agreement. Now, that was a hard-fought settlement. Maintaining peace is integral, yet the Tories don't seem to care. They'll happily risk that. They've done it with this and they're doing it with Brexit in pursuit of their own messed up, backward principles. Be mindful of what can happen, because right now the Tories are going after the easy targets. They're going after the migrants. They're going after minorities. They're not going to stop there. Next, they're going to go for the LGBTQ plus community. They're going to go for people of colour. They're going to go for poor people. It's going to get to the point that we're going to think, shit, the majority of people in this country have had their human rights infringed upon. We have to be level-headed. We cannot allow the government to exploit our anger, and don't allow them to exploit it and direct it at other communities. Don't allow them to do it with people we may disagree with or those we perceive as bad. Human rights is universal. It must be applied equally to everyone at all times. The last couple of years, this government have become increasingly authoritarian, whether it's a plethora of bills that have been proposed or passed, like the police bill, the Crime Courts and Sentencing Act, the Nationality and Borders Act, the Public Order Bill, in which they want to silence freedom of speech. They want to attack civil liberties, they want to attack your right to protest. This is not about the left or the right. It's not about agreeing with certain people's politics. This is a general attack on basic fundamentals in a civilized society.